The wind whispered through the trees, creating an eerie melody that seemed to echo the unease in my heart. I stood alone in the isolated cabin, its weathered walls bearing the scars of time. My heart raced, my breath shallow and uncertain. The darkness outside pressed against the windows, and I could feel its weight seeping into the corners of the room. I had come here seeking solitude, but now, as the night deepened, it seemed a reckless decision to venture into the woods, to this remote place where even the moon struggled to cast its feeble light. The cabin had stood here for decades, abandoned and forgotten by the world. Its history whispered tales of tragedy and madness, stories that made the locals shun it, their gazes averted when its name was mentioned. But I was drawn to it, inexplicably pulled by a curiosity that bordered on obsession. The first night had been peaceful enough. The crackling fire in the hearth had provided a flickering barrier against the encroaching darkness. I had convinced myself that the tales were mere superstitions, the product of idle minds seeking to create drama out of thin air. I paced the uneven floorboards, my footsteps echoing like a heartbeat. Every rustle of leaves outside sent shivers down my spine, and the howling wind carried with it an almost mournful cry. The isolation that had once felt serene now felt oppressive, like a weight pressing down on my chest. I longed for the safety of civilization, for the warmth of human company. As the clock struck midnight, the air grew colder, and I wrapped my arms around myself for comfort. It was then that I heard it, the faintest whisper, like a voice carried on the wind. My heart pounded in my ears, and I strained to catch the words. Was it my imagination playing tricks on me, or was there really someone or something else in the cottage with me?
Leave.
The voice whispered so softly that I could barely be sure I had heard it at all. I turned, my gaze darting around the room, but there was no one to be seen. The fire had dwindled to a mere ember, its feeble glow casting elongated shadows that danced on the walls. My breath hitched in my throat, and I took a step back, my mind a swirling chaos of fear and uncertainty. I was alone in the cottage, surrounded only by the remnants of the past, but the feeling of being watched persisted, an insidious presence that wormed its way into my thoughts. My rational mind battled against the rising tide of unease, but a part of me knew that something was wrong, that I'd trespassed into a world beyond my understanding. I tried to distract myself with a book, to focus on the printed words and escape the tendrils of fear that threatened to overwhelm me. And then, just as the night seemed to stretch into an infinite abyss, I heard it again, a sound, faint yet distinct, a scratching against the window pane. My breath caught in my throat as I turned toward the window. I could see nothing outside, only the impenetrable darkness. But there it was again, a rhythmic scratching that sent shivers down my spine. And there, in that feeble light, I saw it. A face contorted in a grotesque smile, eyes gleaming with an otherworldly hunger. My scream caught in my throat as I stumbled back, my heart racing like a runaway train. The face pressed against the window, its flesh merging with the shadows, its fingers leaving streaks of moisture on the glass.
Let me in.
Its voice a distorted whisper that seemed to echo from the depths of hell itself. I turned and fled, my footsteps echoing through the cottage as I rushed toward the door. Panic surged within me, a primal instinct to escape, to flee from the nightmare that had come to life. The door creaked open and I stumbled out into the night, the cold air a shock to my senses. I dared not look back, not wanting to see if the face still lingered in the window. As I ran through the woods, the wind howling in my ears, I could feel the presence behind me, a malevolent force that pursued me relentlessly. The trees seemed to reach out with gnarled branches, their twisted forms morphing into grotesque figures. I stumbled, my breath ragged, my heart pounding like a drum. Finally, I burst through the tree line and stumbled onto a road where a passing car screeched to a halt. Its driver shouting in alarm. I must have been a sight, wild-eyed and trembling, my clothes covered in dirt and leaves. They took me to the nearest town where I was met with skeptical glances and pitying stares. I tried to explain what had happened, to recount the nightmarish events that had unfolded in the cabin. But the words sounded hollow, even to my own ears. I vowed never to return to that accursed place, to leave its secrets buried in the darkness where they belonged. But in the dead of night, I still hear that whisper.
Let me in.
That voice that beckons me back to the cabin, back to the horror that waits in the depths of the night.